Chapter 136, Did the Neighbor Capture Wife's Affair? Early in the morning, Suro returned home with the children, expecting to see Fang Hao. However, upon entering, she discovered that not only was Fang Hao not at home, but the bed in the bedroom hadn't been touched. This indicated that Fang Hao hadn't slept in the room last night. She went to the study, where she found printed materials and an ashtray filled with cigarette butts. Clearly, Fang Hao had spent the night here. Contacting a private investigator, she learned that Fang Hao was already at the hospital. From the feedback received, it was evident that Fang Hao had been seen having a meal in the cafeteria. Suddenly, she had a thought: should she have Fang Hao fired from the hospital to prevent him from only thinking about work? However, she couldn't discuss this idea with her mother, as her mother would surely disagree. So, she decided to talk to her father. "Fang Hao, you're so indifferent to me. Have you truly forgotten that without me, Suro, you wouldn't have stayed in the hospital all those years?" With this thought, Suro felt she should assert her dominance a bit, to make Fang Hao realize that leaving her, Suro, would make it challenging for him to establish himself in this city. After weighing the options and receiving advice from an unnamed person the night before, she decided to send a message to her father. "Dad, now that Fang Hao is so busy with hospital matters and there's no one to take care of the house, and I'm pregnant again, it won't work without someone looking after things. Can you find a new job for Fang Hao?" She quickly received a response from her father, agreeing to the suggestion. Ding dong. Suro heard the doorbell ring and saw neighbors Ruili and Xiaohu outside. Xiaohu was calling for Tian, indicating they would go to school together. The three kids went off to school together, but after running for a while, Jia couldn't keep up and was panting for breath. Suro went over, took Jia's hand, but she still struggled to catch her breath. Not paying much attention, Suro pulled Jia along, but Ruili lifted Jia, saying, "You didn't eat breakfast this morning, that's why you don't have energy. Dad didn't make delicious food at home, so I didn't have an appetite. When your dad isn't busy, he'll make delicious food for you. Don't worry." Ruili turned to Suro and said, "Xiaoro, you should take care of your mom now. You're also experiencing pregnancy symptoms. If Dr. Fang isn't at home, let Jia have meals at our place." "No need. My husband should be getting a new job soon. He's too busy at the hospital. I asked my dad to find him an easier job so he can take care of the family more." Suro smiled, portraying a situation where everything was under control. Ruili thought Fang Hao was too busy, often working overnight on research papers. In her memory, Fang Hao spent a considerable amount of time working night shifts. As they chatted casually, after sending the little ones into the kindergarten gate, the two women walked back. Suddenly, Ruili said, "Xiaoro, since you're not often at home, you should install a camera. It'll prevent your house from being burgled." "Oh, the camera at our doorstep happened to capture this. I'll send it to you." She pulled up a section of the video on her phone and sent it to Suro. After watching it, Suro felt as if she had been struck by lightning. It was footage of him entering her house with a key. If her husband saw this, everything would be revealed. She suddenly felt that Ruili was really troublesome. However, she couldn't intervene since Ruili wanted to install a camera. She smirked and said, "He's a relative of mine, not a thief." "Oh, so he's a relative," Ruili replied. Suro wanted Ruili to delete the video, but she was afraid it would be futile. Back at home, Suro quickly contacted the unnamed person and sent the video, saying, "You've caused trouble again. Find a way to make this video disappear. Otherwise, if it falls into my husband's hands, you're finished." "What? Who filmed the video?" "The neighbor's camera accidentally captured you. I told Ruili you're my cousin to fool her, but if my husband finds out, he's so smart he'll see through the deception. My husband has already confronted me, and if he manages to find you, he'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau for a divorce." "Oh, is Little Turtle that impressive? Well, he also needs to see this video. To make it disappear, find the manufacturer and have them delete it from the server. I have some free time these days, so I'll play with him a bit. Do you still want to play tricks in front of him? Hurry up and go abroad for a vacation." The call ended, leaving Suro speechless. Based on her understanding of that person, he would definitely compete with Fang Hao. She glanced at the video feedback from the private detective. Fang Hao was at the hospital working and not causing trouble, so she felt a bit relieved. Lu Yu arrived at the gynecology office in the hospital and received good news. Fang Hao submitted 3 research papers to her. and after reviewing them, she was very satisfied with the quality. She called Fang Hao over and said directly, "Fang Hao, Xiaolu has gone to the party school. You don't need to follow her. Come with me. Director Liu assigned me a task yesterday. I have to stay in the outpatient department. I can't leave." Fang Hao smirked, enjoying the feeling of being valued by someone. In theory, going to gynecology would give him a greater chance of becoming an associate chief physician and an even better chance of becoming the chief of gynecology. However, with Lu Jing's return from the party school and her subsequent application for the position of deputy dean, it was only a matter of time before she secured it. Following the deputy dean was a better choice. His current achievements, apart from his own abilities, were also due to the platform provided by Lu Jing. Our country lacks not talented individuals, but rather platforms for talented people to thrive. Lu Yu smiled teasingly and said, "This girl is on guard against me like against a thief." She felt speechless and took out a professional book on gynecological diseases from the drawer, handing it to Fang Hao. Aunt Han is recovering well now and can participate in social activities freely. She's in a great mood. Yesterday, she did a big charity event and asked me to thank you. Fang Hao picked up the book, flipped through a page, and saw a 2 million yuan check inside. His pupils contracted. This book is very valuable. Take it back and study it carefully." Lu Yu waved her hand, signaling Fang Hao to leave. Do you think your meager gynecological skills are remarkable? You don't understand much with only a few years of clinical experience in gynecology. Go back and study this book carefully." Lu Yu gestured that the walls had ears, urging Fang Hao to leave with the book. "Okay, I'll go back and study hard." Fang Hao closed the book and accepted the 2 million. Aunt Han is still quite lovely, much cuter than her granddaughter. As Fang Hao left, he noticed a nurse at the door pretending to look at her phone, most likely eavesdropping. He remained calm, picked up the book, and left. Director Lu Yu was also a shrewd person. Chapter 137, Exposure of the Scheme. Fang Hao carefully pocketed the check, with no intention of immediately cashing it. Once deposited into their joint account, it would become marital property, and he had plans for divorce. He intended to keep this money as capital for his future in the city. Although 2 million was a substantial sum, he couldn't find any joy in it. The distance to buying a house in Tianji Peak, worth tens of millions or even hundreds of millions, seemed insurmountable. In the hospital, his income came from basic wages, without any benefits or rewards for the next 3 years. He only received 3,000 yuan per month. For the past 4 years, that's all he earned. But with this private practice, he made 2 million. Who could he share this insight with? At 11 o'clock, Fang Hao received a call from the hospital administration asking him to come to the office. As he entered the office of the hospital director, he noticed the old director looking stern and displeased. He wondered if he had been discovered for taking money. It shouldn't be possible. With Han Yun's capabilities, would the old director dare to investigate? Lu Yu wouldn't be so foolish as to set him up. However, the old director's words made Fang Hao's heart sink. The old director said, "Submit your resignation. I've approved it. You can leave." Fang Hao was surprised. "Director, have I done something wrong? Why do you want me to resign? Have you really done nothing wrong? Look at this." The old director turned the computer screen toward Fang Hao and played a video for him to watch. In the surveillance footage, in the middle of the night, Fang Hao and Li Wei were smoking, and Fang Hao even gave Li Wei a cigarette. His mind thundered. How could there be a camera? At that time, he was feeling very annoyed and neglected the fact that there was a camera. Of course, he couldn't have predicted that Li Wei would be involved. The director said, "See, your actions. Do you still deserve to be a doctor? You don't. And you also had him transferred to another hospital for treatment. You're a person who takes advantage of others." Fang Hao quickly thought. With video evidence, he couldn't deny it. He could only admit his mistake, but leaving the hospital was not an option. Without the platform of the Provincial People's Hospital, he couldn't take private patients outside. He had worked hard here for 4 years, with the goal of becoming the best doctor. Now that his ambition was unfulfilled, he couldn't just leave. He considered the hospital's regulations. This didn't warrant dismissal but could lead to disciplinary action. The penalty would likely be a fine, ranging from 500 to 1,000 yuan. He had to fight for it. He said, "Director, this isn't entirely my fault. Firstly, it's a smoking area, and I can smoke there. Also, in the middle of the night, I didn't know where Li Wei was. Secondly, I was in a bad mood at the time and didn't think much about it. Lastly, Li Wei asked me for a cigarette. When I refused, he threatened me, saying he would lie down and make it difficult for me later. I had no choice but to give it to him. Director, you can penalize me, but I won't resign. The director said, letting you resign is giving you face. The incident with Li Wei last time wasn't entirely my fault. His family called him, and he was angry. Did I have any face left after that? When I entered the ward, he didn't even talk to me. How did it turn into a verbal confrontation between us? This time, he went down to smoke and drank in the ward. You know about it, but you didn't say anything. Now you want me to resign? Director, what's bothering you about me? This time, Fang Hao couldn't endure it. He had to fight back, otherwise, the director would keep pressuring him, and now, asking him to resign meant he had no chance for a comeback. The director frowned and said, you claim Li Wei threatened you, but that's just your side of the story. Fang Hao responded, if that's the case, when you first punished me, it was also based on someone else's side of the story, right? You also relied on my inability to provide evidence. Now, why don't you call Li Wei and let him confront me? That way, we'll have evidence. You? The director's face darkened. Would she dare call Li Wei? She didn't have the courage. Fang Hao took out his phone and said, or should I call him? I remember the phone number he left on the medical report. I can ask him to come and clarify the situation with you. That's enough. If you won't resign, I'll punish you. I'll publicly criticize you throughout the hospital. By then, you'll have no face left. I've already been publicly criticized last time, right? I did nothing wrong, yet I was forced to apologize to the patients. After that, I was assigned to the 4 infusion hall. What face do I have left? If you want to criticize, go ahead. Fang Hao stood up and asked, Director, can I ask a question? Why don't you like me? You think highly of yourself. Do I, an old person, have to like you? The director was also angered. Great, I thought it was because of the issue between you and Zhou Fen. You couldn't compete with my mother-in-law, so you developed a bias against her son-in-law. Since that's not the case, I know you're treating me fairly. Fang Hao left. Although he knew the director would punish him, maybe even fire him, it felt good. After venting, he thought for a moment and informed Lu Jing about it. Lu Jing was also surprised, not only because Fang Hao really gave Li Wei a cigarette, but also because she thought Fang Hao had clashed with the director. She told Fang Hao not to act impulsively and said she would call the director to clarify. After more than 10 minutes, Lu Jing called Fang Hao again, asking him to continue working and not let this incident affect his job. She assured him that the matter wouldn't be severe. At the same time, she told him to reduce smoking, even if he couldn't quit, to avoid any issues. Fang Hao was grateful and realized he had been smoking excessively lately. He felt like a child admitting his mistakes and promised to be more careful in the future. After half an hour, Fang Hao saw Lu Yu coming to the outpatient office. He quickly asked, Director, how's my situation? There will be disciplinary action. After all, you gave Li Wei a cigarette, which is against the rules. We'll deduct 1,000 yuan from your salary. Lu Yu casually stated, looking at the cigarette ashtray on Fang Hao's desk. She emptied it and took the cigarettes away. Fang Hao sighed in relief and asked, is there anything else? No, just deducting 1,000 yuan. Are you not upset? Do you really think money comes easy? No, now I only have basic wages. Deducting another 1,000 means my family will have to endure hardships next month. Fang Hao pretended to be distressed. That's good to know. Oh, I also asked. This time it's mainly because of the fire at your home. Your father-in-law spoke to the director, asking you to resign from the hospital, and they'll arrange a new position for you. Feeling betrayed, Fang Hao stood up abruptly and said, my dad didn't tell me about this. What I mean is, any position won't be better than the one you have here. You're naturally suited to be a doctor. So, don't resign. In fact, the director will retire in about half a year. Lu Yu said cryptically, then left without further conversation, leaving Fang Hao to ponder over his situation. Chapter 138, Being Low-Key. At noon, Fang Hao didn't go home. This time, he kept a low profile, reading the materials Professor Zhu Dan had sent to Lu Jing's office. His pursuit of a PhD was a continuation of his previous part-time postgraduate studies. He had already paid the first installment of the tuition. During the last conference, he had successfully completed the interview. At that time, he hadn't formally chosen an advisor, and it was only later that he decided on Professor Zhu Dan. Fang Hao planned to complete his professional studies as quickly as possible, take the exams arranged by the program, and once he passed, move on to the proposal stage. At that point, he would pay another sum of money to start working on his thesis. He intended to conduct his research at the Provincial People's Hospital. While pursuing his PhD, Fang Hao would continue working at the hospital. If he had to choose, he wouldn't leave the Provincial People's Hospital. With Lu Jing as his support, he believed he could avoid unnecessary restrictions and continue his clinical work. Fang Hao also had a sense of competition. His in-laws wanted him to leave the Provincial People's Hospital, but then he couldn't. Moving to another institution would likely lead to being controlled by the Su family, facing constraints everywhere, and living under the shadow of the Su family for the rest of his life. If he allowed himself to be restrained by the Su family, he wouldn't be able to buy a house in Tianji Peak. After all, even Su Buiyuan didn't know where to buy one. Now that he was getting a divorce, why involve himself with the Su family? Medical knowledge is limitless because every patient is unique, and illnesses vary based on individual differences in physiology and other factors. As a doctor, one must adhere to principles while embracing change. This way, when encountering unfamiliar medical conditions, a doctor can remain composed. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Fang Hao received a call from Lu Yu. He thought the hospital's punishment had changed, and he couldn't help but worry. He said, "Director, I'm in my office, and I haven't smoked again." "It's not about you. There's a complicated case here. Come to the gynecology consultation room. Hurry up." "Okay." After hanging up, Fang Hao wondered why he was being called. However, considering Lu Yu's responsibility for medical affairs in gynecology, he understood that Li Xiaoxi, the less experienced doctor, couldn't handle a complex case. He went to the gynecology department, where he found a tense atmosphere with many people gathered around. A man was shouting, and although Fang Hao couldn't hear clearly, he knew it was another medical dispute, and some unfortunate doctor was likely involved. Entering the consultation room, Fang Hao saw Lu Yu, Li Xiaoxi, and other gynecology experts, as well as a middle-aged woman in casual clothes. The woman's skin looked problematic, and she appeared unwell. Fang Hao thought she must be the patient. It was unusual for a patient to participate in a consultation, but he didn't question it. Lu Yu explained, "Fang Hao, she's the patient, and the medical records are on the desk." Approaching, Fang Hao said, "May I check your pulse?" "Sure." The middle-aged woman found Fang Hao quite handsome, and he exuded a star-like aura. She felt comfortable just looking at him, much like how a man might feel towards a beautiful woman. She didn't hesitate to agree to Fang Hao's request. After all, he was only checking her pulse, and it wasn't an unreasonable request. Fang Hao took the pulse while reviewing the medical records, realizing that the doctor who had signed it was Li Xiaoxi. He thought, "This is bad. How did it end up being her again? I'm going to offend Li Xiaoxi once more." He glanced at Li Xiaoxi, who also looked back at him with displeasure, a warning not to speak recklessly. However, Fang Hao ignored her. He was here to embrace Director Lu Yu's support. After examining the patient's pulse, Fang Hao asked, "Why did you choose to participate in the consultation? What do you want to know?" The female patient explained, "Previously, she kept saying I had liver disease and told me to see the liver disease department. But after going there, it didn't help. I've had this illness for 10 years. I've read medical books, and I want to know which type of liver disease I have." Fang Hao replied, "You don't have liver disease, it's a form of porphyria, a dominant hereditary disorder. You should undergo tests. While waiting for the results, you can also check information online to gain a better understanding." He then looked at Lu Yu and said, "In my opinion, it's acute intermittent porphyria." Li Xiaoxi's pupils contracted, and she instinctively grabbed the medical record book, carefully examining it. She sat there in shock, realizing that she had seen this case 3 times but failed to identify it. Lu Yu, too, was inwardly alarmed, but she nodded since the patient's symptoms generally matched Fang Hao's diagnosis. She said to the female patient, "Now you have a choice. You can undergo examinations here, and then we'll discuss a treatment plan. Alternatively, you can go to another hospital for testing. Your case wasn't identified by us previously, nor by doctors in other hospitals." The patient looked at Fang Hao and asked, Can you tell from this? Do you think I can be cured? Well, my skills are limited, considering I haven't practiced for many years. However, I suggest you understand your condition first before making a decision. We can conduct the examination here at no cost, and you can also seek a second opinion at another hospital. After that, you can decide where to proceed with the treatment. Fang Hao didn't make a definitive statement since this was Li Xiaoxi's patient. If it weren't for Lu Yu, he wouldn't have come to the gynecology department. The patient said, "I'll find out more first and then undergo the examination. If I decide to receive treatment at this hospital someday, I'll give you a call." I'm not from this department. Please contact Director Lu or Director Li, they will assist you. Fang Hao tactfully deflected the patient's request, then looked at Lu Yu and said, "I have patients on my end, I'll head back. Call me if there are any developments." "Go ahead." Lu Yu knew this was a rare disease, challenging to treat. Considering Fang Hao had just been punished by the hospital director, not being overly proactive was the right approach. Now that the diagnosis was known, the next steps involved confirming the severity through further examinations and deciding on a treatment plan. These could be discussed within the gynecology department during this time frame. Lu Yu arranged for the patient to undergo tests and handled the situation with the disruptive patient's family. Soon, the normal order was restored. The test results came back quickly, confirming Fang Hao's diagnosis of acute intermittent porphyria. This guy has some skills. How can I bring him to the gynecology department? Lu Yu was troubled not only by the treatment plan but also by the challenge of recruiting Fang Hao. Yet, Fang Hao was in the hands of his niece, Lu Jing. To get him, she needed Lu Jing's consent. Chapter 139, Dreaming Big. After returning to the office and checking the evening emergency situation, Fang Hao found that the deputy director and specialist from the emergency surgery department were still on duty, so he wasn't needed. After work, he went directly to the outskirts to continue acupuncture for Zhang Jun and his mother-in-law. At Zhang Jun's place, there was no presence of his younger sister-in-law, only one of Zhang Jun's cousins accompanying him. It was evident that after Fang Hao advised against Zhang Jun getting close to women last night, Zhang Jun didn't allow the secretary to come over. It would be cruel to watch the secretary, who couldn't be touched, while being unable to do anything himself. Zhang Jun felt very comfortable during acupuncture, his depressed mood from the day instantly improved. He said, "Little brother, there's no one else here, let's have a heart-to-heart talk. Tell me, what do you want? You're so young, don't tell me you have no desires." Fang Hao replied, "I want to buy a house at Tianjifeng." Zhang Jun was stunned at the revelation. He said, "Well, I thought you had no desires, but I didn't expect your aspirations to be so high." Fang Hao chuckled, "Dream big, my friend. Indeed, it's a pretty big dream. But even if you can't achieve it in the end, aiming for the top and reaching somewhere in the middle is still excellent. That's exactly how I see it. Start with the best goal, even if it turns out I can't afford it, I can settle for something less. I don't even know the current situation at Tianjifeng. Hee. Zhang Gu, with your broad experience, how should I go about striving for it? You're a son-in-law of the Su family. Let's not consider my wife's background. How about relying on myself?" "Well," after some thought, Zhang Jun said, "it's not impossible. Just like me back then, I went to study medicine on a whim just to be with Lu Jing. Who would have thought I'd end up making more money than my father and nearly dying of late-stage cancer? In the end, you saved me. So, the future is unpredictable. Whether it becomes a reality or not, it's all possible." He continued, "Tianjifeng's houses have a unique background and aren't entirely open to the public. When you want to move in, you need a political review and approval from at least 3 co-tenants. It's quite strict. However, those houses can't just sit there without occupants. Eventually, they will be sold. I can help you with the political review and approval part, but I can't decide the price set by the developers. There are 5 developers in total: Li Wei, Jiang Yue, Sujia, Wang Dong, and Hao Chao. When these 5 developers agree, and you add the political review qualification I helped you obtain, then you can buy there. However, once you move in, you may find that it's not as great as you imagined, especially in terms of the environment." Haha. Li Bei? Could it be that old man? Sujia? The name sounds familiar, could she be Jin Xiaojian's mother? If that's the case, maybe I can persuade her. But who are the other 3? I have no idea. Fang Hao shook his head and smiled, buying a house is really troublesome. I don't even have a starting point now. When I really need Zhang Ji's guarantee, I'll trouble you. Then you'll have to work hard and gather enough money before I kick the bucket. Zhang Ge won't kick the bucket. Thanks for the auspicious words. After finishing the treatment, Fang Hao, smoking a cigarette, walked towards his mother-in-law's recuperation place. When he arrived, he noticed his wife's car was there, and he could hear the voices of his children, Jie Jie and Tian Tian, from inside. He extinguished his cigarette and went in, finding the whole family gathered. The two kids dropped their activities and ran towards Fang Hao, hugging his legs and calling him Dad repeatedly. After picking them up, they planted kisses on both sides of his face. After playing with the kids for a while, Fang Hao put them down and approached his mother-in-law to begin the examination. Her recovery was progressing very smoothly. During acupuncture, Fang Hao asked, "Mom, don't you want me to be a doctor anymore? If that's the case, I won't come for your checkup tomorrow." His wife's expression changed as she listened to this. Confused, his mother-in-law asked, "Why would I not want you to be a doctor? You performed my surgery. Why would I be dissatisfied?" Fang Hao continued, "At noon, the hospital director told me that Dad went to talk to her and arranged for me to resign and find another job. I think it's because the treatment I provided for you didn't yield the results you wanted. So, you're not satisfied with me, and they want to find me a new job. I didn't know about this. You did my surgery, how could I be dissatisfied? Don't worry, I'll call Su Buiyuan." His mother-in-law asked Su Ro to bring the phone. Su Ro, not expecting Fang Hao to complain, was quite unhappy. She said, "Mom, it's late. Don't call Dad now, he's probably resting. He's getting old, you know." However, Fang Hao took out his phone, dialed Su Buiyuan's number, and handed it to his mother-in-law. Seeing this, Su Ro glared at Fang Hao. Since her parents were talking, she had no choice but to hold off on her plan to suppress Fang Hao. She was also displeased, thinking about how to restrain him. With a stern tone, his mother-in-law scolded Su Buiyuan over the phone, then hung up. She turned to Fang Hao and said, "You are very suitable to be a doctor. Continue your medical practice, don't listen to your father." "Alright, I won't listen to him." Fang Hao was satisfied. From the conversation, it was clear that his mother-in-law no longer held her husband in high regard. Not only was she battling a serious illness, but Su Buiyuan was also engaging in extramarital affairs, showing great disrespect to his wife. As for Su Ro, Fang Hao simply ignored her. Su Ro said, "Mom, Dad just wants your husband to have a better position. After all, he has been working so hard recently. Dad is concerned about your husband. I'm pregnant and need more of his time too." Fang Hao responded, "Mom, did you see that? Xiao and Dad are in cahoots. These two, they can set fires but won't let me light a lamp as a humble farmer." Implicitly, he meant that Su Buiyuan and Su Ro were both unfaithful, birds of a feather, corrupting the morals of the family. Fang Hao looked at Su Ro and said, "Xiao, you're just too idle, so you have too many thoughts. As the saying goes, a full stomach leads to extravagant desires. Of course, I won't hinder you. If you have time to play outside, I support it, after all, you are young and beautiful. I'm just a rural bumpkin." His mother-in-law frowned slightly and said, "Xiao, you're present too. This is good. I'll ask you directly, have you ever betrayed Fang Hao? I mean, have you met a man superior to Fang Hao and considered divorcing him?" "No," Su Ro replied, dissatisfied with Fang Hao's instigation. But Fang Hao continued to provoke, saying, "Mom, Xiao won't admit it. Of course, I can be open-minded about it. There's a saying, to lead a good life, you should wear a bit of green on your head." Chapter 140, You've Dug Your Own Grave. Listening to Fang Hao's words, his mother-in-law furrowed her brows tightly. She wanted to say something but hesitated. She waved her hand and said, "You two, don't play Tai Chi in front of me. Do you wish for my death? Xiao, take the kids home. Don't bring them here in the evening, they make too much noise. I'll find something to eat." Fang Hao, seeing his mother-in-law looking at him, went to a nearby cupboard, found some dry bread, and started eating. His phone rang again, and he took the opportunity to step outside and answer it. It was a call from Lu Jing, inquiring about the diagnosis of acute intermittent porphyria in the gynecology department. She was keeping an eye on Fang Hao. His mother-in-law said to Su Ro, "I don't know how to talk to you. Are both of you brain dead? Arranging a job for Fang Hao at this time? Besides being a doctor, what else can he do? Can't you see his years of hard work and achievements? Xiao, is this your idea? What are you thinking? Are you really short of money? Mom, I'm not short of money. It's just that Fang Hao keeps suspecting me, and he won't talk to me. I'm pregnant, shouldn't he be more considerate? Is it his child? Mom, don't argue with me. Tell me, is it his child? It's Fang Hao's, but he also doubts me and wants me to have an abortion. Su Rou revealed her frustration. Her mother, who had surgery performed by Fang Hao, was currently under his treatment. Surely, she would stand on Fang Hao's side. The only way to regain her mother's support was through the child. Is it that serious? Her mother's brows furrowed, assessing her daughter. She was exceptionally beautiful, causing trouble for the nation and the people. She said, "You're too playful. Now you've dug your own grave." Mom, I didn't. I only have one man, my husband. Su Rou felt anxious. Judging by her mother's tone, she clearly didn't believe her. Her mother said, "This kid Fang Hao comes from the countryside. For 4 years, he has been diligent and honest. He won't take the initiative to cause trouble. Since he said these things about you, there must be some information or things he's seen. You should reflect on yourself. You and your dad are really alike. Go back, I want to rest." Feeling upset, Su Rou walked out of the house. She saw Fang Hao nibbling on bread and drinking mineral water. Although she felt sorry for him, she was angry at the moment. Approaching him, she questioned, "Why did you say these things in front of my mom? Baseless accusations. Are you looking for trouble? What? You still don't believe that I found out about your affair? Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about the sanatorium. You and him should have left many beautiful memories here. Let me remind you, on New Year's Day, you said you were going on a business trip for 5 days, but you spent 4 days here. You might have forgotten, but before New Year's, you told me you were going to the south." Fang Hao glanced at his wife, finding her anger amusing. "Did you really think you were that innocent girl? Now that you're angry, I have to turn into a lapdog to please you? You're quite rotten now, making people nauseous. What you said has no evidence." Su Rou denied it, even though she felt shocked and scared inside. Fang Hao's timing and events were all accurate. She and that person had been here, even walking hand in hand along this path. Now her husband was investigating. How ironic. Yes, it can only mean that I'm really foolish. For these 4 years, I've been a fool, trusting you unconditionally, and you can betray me recklessly. Whenever I doubted you, tracked you, I could find you, catch you in the act, and we wouldn't be in this situation now. You could have flown away with him, and you two would be the real couple. Husband, don't overthink it. None of what you said is true. Su Rou concluded that Fang Hao had no evidence. At this point, Fang Hao only had suspicions. Haha, not true? Keep deceiving yourself. Let me reveal something to you. I have 100% evidence of your affair and betrayal. If I bring it out, even if you refuse to divorce, if I take it to court, I'll win 100%. By then, you'll be ruined. But, I don't plan to let that bastard off cheaply. I don't care if leaving the hospital was your dad's idea, yours, or the result of your discussion with that scoundrel. In any case, I will find him. Fang Hao glanced at his wife and said, "I asked you to confess who he is, but you still want to protect him. You refuse to expose him, indicating that you genuinely care about him. If that's the case, is there any point in us being husband and wife? Oh, right, you're carrying that man's child. Fang Hao, the child is yours. How do you want me to prove it to make you believe it's yours? The child, whether it is or isn't doesn't matter anymore. You don't love me. Husband, I do love you. Is that so? Then tell me, who is that scoundrel? Husband, there is no one as you think. I only love you. Haha, it seems you care about him a bit more. You need to understand, I am your husband. Going behind my back and messing around with that scoundrel, you are giving me a green hat. You are humiliating me. Su Rou, it makes me feel disgusted. Fang Hao spoke passionately and threw the bread and water in his hand directly. Su Rou approached, pulled Fang Hao, and said, "Don't be impulsive. My mom still needs your treatment. You can rest assured, I am a doctor. I have professional ethics. I'm not like you." Fang Hao shook off his wife's hand and walked inside. Fang Hao, let me tell you something. I've completed this research project, and the National Math Group highly praised my work. The project funds are about to be released, and I'll give you a portion. After all, this project was based on the critical ideas you provided. It's hard to say how much, but several 100,000 shouldn't be a problem. His mother-in-law spoke gently to Fang Hao. Fang Hao smiled and said, "Mom, this is your money, and I can't accept it." "Wait a minute, you don't want me to leave the hospital, do you? You're giving me hundreds of thousands so that I don't have to work, and I can stay at home to take care of Shero. It's not bad, hee hee." Su Ro raised her eyebrows. Fang Hao's tone and words were the same as when he apologized to the nanny last night, cunning and dangerous. Once Fang Hao tore off the mask and irritated his mother-in-law, what would happen? Fang Hao changed the subject, saying, "Mom, if I'm not at the hospital, I won't have the prescription authority. By then, I won't be able to prescribe medicine for you, and I won't be responsible for your life and death." His mother-in-law said, "I didn't say for you to leave the hospital. I support you being a doctor. If you, a country bumpkin, don't work as a doctor, what else can you do? Pa, a little white face like you can say such things. My face was originally white, isn't it? Do you want to buy a house at Tianji Peak relying on this little white face? Dream on. I'll sell my villa and Shero's house. Maybe then you can afford the first installment." "Are you going to sell your villa to pay for the first installment at Tianji Peak?" Fang Hao stared blankly. He knew his mother-in-law was not an ordinary person. If she spoke, it meant she would do it.